Hi everyone, my name is Nina and I'm the Events and Communications Officer here at the AUC. Welcome to today's Exchange webinar. The title of this webinar is The Use of SharePoint in ISO Management Systems. Thank you for registering, and thanks also to John Mills and James Durham from Lancaster University who will be leading this webinar for us today. Just so you all know, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the AUC website later on today. So just a little bit of housekeeping to go over now before we get started. I'm hoping everybody can hear me well. Just so you know, for the time being, I have placed all of your microphones on mute just to keep background noise to a minimum. There will be a number of opportunities throughout this webinar to ask questions, so please feel free to unmute your microphones during these periods whenever you wish to by clicking the microphone button next to your name. You can also use the chat box to ask questions. To use this, please click on the chat button at the bottom of your screen. A pop-up box will then appear and you can send messages through that box by typing them into the box available there. So that's all from me for now. I will now pass over to John and James, who will get us started.
Okay, thanks very much, Nina. Afternoon, everybody. I'm Jonathan Mills. I'm the Environment Manager at Lancaster University, and I've got...
Yeah, I'm James Durham. I'm System Support Officer with the Facilities Department at the University.
So we're going to run through the use of SharePoint in our 14001, stroke 18001 management systems, how we've sort of like established and set that up, how we use it at Lancaster University, and sort of like some of the glitches and issues and benefits we sort of like found from using this system, and to be honest, learning quite a lot about this system as we've sort of deployed it. So a little bit of background first before we sort of like jump into looking at the system live. The Lancaster University facilities, we were accredited to ISO 14001 in December 2014, and we were accredited to 18001 health and safety management systems the year prior to that. The scope of the system, the management system, so 14001, 18001 management systems, covers facilities, activities and operations, so it's not the whole university. So it covers the different departments of facilities, which range from security to the sports centre, to our cleaning activities, energy management, our preschool, tenants, activities. And you'll see, so I'll go through all the list of the different areas once we're actually into the SharePoint system. So we cover all of the sort of like different departments of facilities sort of like is responsible for, plus also sort of cross-functional activities as well, say for example waste management and disposal across the campus. In terms of sort of like when we first put SharePoint into place, personally I was just sort of viewing SharePoint as basically a document sort of like management and storage system that everybody could access. But it's transpired it's a bit more powerful than that, and so we found it sort of like very useful indeed, and hopefully we'll be able to sort of like cover some of those points with you. So just give me a moment and I'll switch over into the SharePoint system itself. Okay, so now we're looking at the home page of the ISO 14001 Environmental Management System. So you can see we've sort of like structured it sort of like fairly simply. We've got 11 sort of like main boxes that we can jump into there, and I'll run through each of these. So run through policy, our MSPs, management system procedures, our FMAPs, which are sort of the system-specific procedures, aspects and impact assessments, legal database, performance issues, training section, audit section, environmental incidents, our EMS meetings area, and emergency preparedness. So we've got those in the boxes in the centre of the management system. And then along the sort of like top bar, you can see you can jump into each of those areas by sort of scanning on the top bar as well. And on the left-hand bar, you can see we can sort of like jump into different parts of the system directly, whether it's the incident register, the training calendar. It's got the libraries, so like the audit reports, templates, audit forms, training plan, and so on. So you can jump into different parts of the system quite easily. Give you an example. Say, for example, I look at the top bar, I can jump straight into the 18001 system that sits parallel to this. So now I've jumped into the front page of the 18001 management system. I can jump back into 14001 very easily. Now, the way we sort of like set up is there's some between the 18001 and 14001 system. We do have management system procedures and FMAPs that are basically joint systems. So there's one control document that lives between the two systems. So it's one control document, but it's on both of the systems, and we've integrated the systems in that way. So there is a degree of integration, but they're not fully integrated management systems. So if I jump back into 14001, take you through the different elements of the system. Now, as Nina said, we're happy to take questions as we're sort of like running through this, or if you want to sort of like go through questions on the chat box, please do. Now, some of the boxes are very straightforward. You can jump straight into the environmental policy statement. That's just basically a document. I think there's a downloadable version of the document that I could jump into as well, which is sort of like the front page of the copy, so it's environmental policy. So that's a very sort of simple part of the system. There we go. So that's the environmental policy. If I go back to the front page again, we can look at the management system section. So we have our management system procedures sort of set up in this as a sort of like a library essentially here. Now, looking at the top, you can see I can either select 14001 MSPs, I can select 18001 MSPs, or I can select all documents. So some of the MSPs are specific for 14001, some 18001, and some are used by both systems. So looking back into 14001, you can see these are all the typical system procedures that you have in an environmental management system. I could pick out one at random, look at roles and responsibilities. I'll just go to try to pick out a really dandy one. Yeah.
This might not work on
that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. So shall I jump at that? Yeah. Okay.
So that's not showing on the screen at the minute, but it's just opened a Word document in a separate window on John's PC here. Yeah.
Okay. Share screen. Okay, so that's sort of like the MSP coming up now. Now, the MSP is very straightforward. There's like objective, introduction, communication, roles and responsibilities. All of the MSPs sort of like structured, have a sort of like a common structure. One of the things you're probably sort of like wondering about on this is that at the beginning, it doesn't have sort of like details on the document control. And there's a reason for this. If I jump back into the, that one. If I jump back into here, can I pick out because the version number or the version control is, can you select that one? Yeah, that one. Version history. So we can look at the version history of the document in SharePoint. And this means we don't obviously have to type anything in at the front end of that particular document. And we've always got a controlled document on the system as part of the management system. And if there's any sort of like, if changes are required, we can check it in, we can sort of check it out, make the changes that are being required to that document, check it back in again and make a comment as to what the changes were for, and that's recorded as part of the in the version control section of the document control. So I'll just jump out of that again. So if I now jump back to that one, browse. Okay. Jump back to the main screen. So that's the MSPs. We've also got sort of facilities management arrangements and procedures. So these are the documents that we developed that are specific sort of procedures we developed that were relevant to the environmental management system. So this includes things such as waste management, drainage systems and materials storage and handling, as well as things like standby generator sets and refrigerant gas systems. Now, these documents were controlled in the same or managed in the same way as the MSPs. So we have sort of like version control on them and so on. So they're quite sort of like, they're managed in a very similar manner. Okay, moving on to aspects and impact assessments. We have this is the list of the aspects and impact assessments that we've sort of got set up in the management system. And the way we've structured this is we've looked at the different departments within facilities and sort of tried to assess the environmental aspects and impacts within these different departments. So we have aspects assessments for conferences, DPP, that's our design, print, photography, food operations, retail and bars, water and securities, projects. So this sort of gives you some idea of the scope of the management system for 18,001 and 14,001. Now, the reason we set it out like this is because we were sort of following the line management structure for these areas, but it made it a lot more sort of applicable for the line managers, and they were a lot easier for them to understand if we were just doing aspect assessments for their area of facilities. Now, that said, doing it this way, we do realise that there are sort of like fairly significant environmental aspects that might have been sort of like omitted from the overall aspect assessment if we just left it with those different areas. So we've also incorporated a campus-wide environmental aspects assessment to cover that. I'll just jump into one to give you an example of what it looks like. So, for example, I'll go to landscape and grounds. We'll have to share that screen. Yeah. Okay. Let me share. Okay, so you've got the aspects assessment for landscape and grounds will have come up on your screen now. So we structured this sort of like fairly sort of standard way for environmental aspects and the impact assessment. So we split it into air emissions, water discharges, got waste generation, contaminated land use resources on there. In terms of the colouring on that system, if it's red, that means we've identified it through the scoring system as a significant environmental aspect, which we have to do something about. And if it's orange, we've also identified it as a significant environmental aspect, for legal reasons, because of legal requirements on that. And you can see, following one example across there, scan down for refueling of vehicles, for example. You can see you've got on the left-hand side, you've got the activity, the aspect and the impact, and then the sort of risk assessment, scoring matrix. And then on the right-hand side, we have a summary of control measures we've got to control that particular environmental aspect or impact. Okay.
John, I'm just going to jump in there. We've had a question through, just asking how much time and skills and resources were required to create the system.
Pass it to James.
Yeah, that's a good question. That may not be able to give you a definitive answer. I mean, I'm not sure when the system they started to set the system up. I started with the university about 18 months ago, and the system was pretty much where it is now, bar a few little aspects of functionality that I've implemented. It's a difficult one to answer, I'm afraid. I don't think I can give you an answer. The SharePoint itself is a very simple piece of software to use once it's set up. We're fortunate we've got an ISS department who look after the servers and essentially gave us a blank space onto which we built these systems. And it doesn't take a great deal of knowledge, I suppose, to be able to build a basic system like we have now. When I started 18 months ago, I had no experience of SharePoint, and my knowledge has come through resources online that I've essentially taught myself, sort of picked up what was provided when I arrived, what I inherited, and when people have come to me and asked, can it do this, can it do that, I've looked into it, gone online, researched it, and been able to implement it. It is fairly user-friendly in that respect. So if there's someone who is confident in using applications, there shouldn't be a problem in being able to set something like this up. It is very simple, and there's plenty of online resources to help you and literally show you through step by step how to implement it.
Yeah, I think just to jump in there, I mean, James's predecessor didn't have too much problem setting it up, because initially we were sort of like just using it as a document storage system, and as far as I understood it was fairly straightforward to set up the front page template, and then we said, oh, we want sort of like half dozen buttons for the different areas, say for the MSPs or the environmental aspects. That sort of like, it didn't really seem to take very long for somebody who's sort of like reasonably competent sort of IT to set that up. They set up a structure for it, and then myself and my colleagues who were actually implementing the management system obviously populated it with all the relevant documents. And whenever we sort of like requested sort of like changes, it does seem to have been sort of like relatively straightforward to take forward. So I think sort of like, to answer the question, you will need somebody who has an IT background and either has previous knowledge of SharePoint or is prepared to teach themselves SharePoint. But actually sort of like setting up a basic system, I don't think it's too time consuming, really.
Okay, we've just had another one in, actually, just to say, how much is the system?
Is there a licensing fee for it then?
I would imagine so. I couldn't answer that question.
Can we get? No one's ever asked. We've never asked that question internally ourselves. But what I can do is we will find out and let participants know on that. Is that okay?
Great. Thanks, John.
Okay, so I'll jump back onto the management system itself. Home. So we've looked at management system procedures, FMAPs, aspect and impact assessment, performance and continuing improvement. So under this sort of like button on the SharePoint front page, we've got our objectives and targets, our management plans and strategies, performance reports, local area action plans, which are like objectives and targets, but sort of like made specific to different departments. And then we also set up a risk and opportunity register and a continual improvement register. So I'll just take a look at a couple of sections on there as it sort of shows some different aspects of what the system is capable of. So if I jump into objectives and targets, I think I have to share, just to go to a new page for this. So, okay, this one's on. Okay. Just go to that one. Yeah. Okay, so this shows environmental management objectives and targets 2015-16. Is this sort of like from a Word document, James? Or this is a PDF? A PDF, right, okay. So the system allows you to sort of either store information sort of like either in sort of like the SharePoint database, I suppose, or you're storing a Word document on it, or an Excel document on it, or a PDF document. And I think you can also store sort of like photograph or sort of like a variety of other types of like files within there. This is like a PDF, and it just shows sort of like the overall environmental objectives and targets for facilities, so those kinds of their waste management, carbon management, utilities, transport, and so on. If I jump back to the, which one is it? No, you should die. Okay, just jump back. Okay, so yeah, back into the objectives and targets. Our objective, oh, that's where I want to get now. Yeah. I'm just trying to jump into the more detailed objectives and targets. Oh, that's it. Right, so gone into objectives and targets. So I look at the 2016 facilities and cement objectives and targets, the Excel file. I think that's showing on your screens now. So I can switch into the overall objectives and targets for facilities for 2016-17. So I've got it structured as objectives, targets, KPIs, and so on. And then for each of the different areas, we jump into waste, for example. We've got sort of more specific and detailed targets, sort of like covering those particular topics. So we've got the target maybe from the previous year, how we actually did with that, did we achieve it, did we not, and the reasons for that, and then what the target is for this year, and sort of like progress update on there. And that gives us a way of tracking sort of like where we are with the environmental objectives and targets. Okay. Stop again. Okay, so as well as the objectives and targets, we've also got in there our management plan, so we can store copies of our carbon management plan or travel plan or a waste strategy within the management system. So I can just sort of like jump into, say, the waste strategy report there. That's come up on your screens. So We have our overall sort of like waste strategy report we can store in there as well. Jump back out of that. Give that a couple of moments. Okay. And then, and we can also store in a similar way. We can store sort of like environmental reports with our other performance data. We've also sort of have local area action plans. These sort of like take objectives and targets to sort of like a local level. We store those in there, and this helps. So share that screen. Sorry, just going to share it. Okay. This helps sort of like managers to sort of like look at sort of like very local sort of like environmental targets, environmental actions. It makes it a lot more relevant sort of like for them in their particular department. Okay. Just give it a moment. So as well as sort of like the objectives and targets, we've also set up a risk. We've also set up a risk and opportunities register that isn't working at the moment, and a continued improvement register. We've gone into an example of what we might have on the continued improvement register. So in the continued improvement register, we've sort of like picked out where we've had findings for environmental audits, either internal audits or sort of external audits, and they were classified as, say, opportunities for improvement. So we put them into our continued improvement register rather than non-conformance register. So we've just got a few in there. I could sort of like jump onto one to give you an example of how that shows. I'll go to view item. And that shows what it's saying about that particular opportunity for improvement. So this was sort of like considering development of a video, for example, for start to use as part of an environmental induction program. So we can put sort of like those type of findings from environmental audits into sort of like separate registers on the SharePoint system. Okay. So moving over to the legal register, which is sort of an interesting area. We have a legal register. Our legal register we actually get through Waterman, so we can link into the legal register by going through this link on the system. I'll just try and do that now. So I'll log in. So this links us into our legal register. I can just sort of like open the legal register fairly easily here. You can see it picks out sort of like what is the directly applicable legislation, and in the legal register, within different categories, whether it's permitting, waste, contaminated land, duty responsibility, hazardous substances. Also run through indirectly applicable legislation, forthcoming legislation, and any other requirements. Then as we go through the register, we can there's a more detailed sections within the register. If I sort of jump back to the beginning, I'll jump into one of those. For example, environmental permitting, water discharges. So it gives a bit of a summary about what the water what the legislation says in relation to that, and then we've got a section on the applicability of that to the university, and we get a sort of like a score on whether we're sort of in compliance or not in compliance, or there might be an issue. And I picked out this one, and we've got some sort of like potential issues with our water discharges that we're trying to address at the moment. So it's a good way, it's really good that we're sort of like able to link directly from the SharePoint system directly into the legal register, and we can sort of flag up exactly where we may have any compliance issues within the management system. Okay. I go back to legal register. Then other sections on the system, we have competence awareness and training. We split this into different sections. We have a training needs analysis. Mainly to open this in a different page. Okay. So this is the training needs analysis. So we've identified the different categories of sort of like the different types of training we need to carry out, and the different categories of staff are on the top axis, and then who needs which training is sort of like indicated on the matrix. So we've got sort of like everything from internal auditor training to toolbox talks to F-gas training to waste compound induction for the training on the left-hand side, and then the different departments within facilities running along the top. This guides us on sort of like what training is needed where. I'll just jump back into the main that one there. Okay, we can sort of like look at the link to that. We've got training plan. So I can look at the training plan for 2016-17. This shows us the training that sort of like we're actually planning to sort of like cover over the 16-17 years. So that would be everything from environmental management system briefing for new managers, toolbox talks, tenants updates, spill response training, auditor refresher training, so on. So that takes the information that's in the sort of like the training needs analysis and puts it into what we're actually planning to deliver over the course of this year. So just jumping back into that, and then that links through to the training record, which I will just share with you. Okay. So after sort of identify what training we do need to do, we have sort of like the training records. So all the staff for the training records, we have the category of training that's listed across the top axis there. So obviously we went from staff name, what training, and the type of training we may offer that type of staff, looking at commercial services, food operations on this particular tab. And on the left-hand side, we've got all the staff who sort of like are in that department. And you can see on the in the matrix, we've listed sort of like green where they've had the training, or yellow where we still need to deliver the training to those particular members of staff. So there's quite a few people who need some training in food operations in that example. Or I can show you on sports centre, for example, same thing, got sort of training that's required on the top axis, the name of staff on the axis on the side, and who's actually had the training there. Similarly with the preschool, you can show sort of like what training is actually required on the top axis and the staff on the side axis. Okay, so I'll just jump back to the main screen on that. So that's the training record, and then obviously supporting that we have like training courses and materials. So all of our training courses and materials we can keep on SharePoint. These will tend to be like Word documents or PowerPoint presentations. For example, I could jump into one on maybe for tenants briefing. We've got a tenants briefing here. So we have a briefing for tenants on, let's get to that next time. Just share this with you. Screen. Yeah, so just give you an example. This is sort of like a briefing we've done for tenants on what their requirements are within the management system, what sort of issues they may have, and how they need to sort of like conform with the university's sort of like systems and procedures. Okay. Okay, so I'm back into the system again. So we've looked at training and awareness. Look at button 8 now, audits and non-performances. This is one of the areas we sort of like, obviously are working on sort of like quite a lot of the time. We have index of all the audits we've carried out. These are categorised by audit type, name of audit, title, the department we're auditing, a particular procedure we may be auditing, the audit date, and the internal auditors. Now, one of the sort of like useful things about sort of like SharePoint is I can just select from there what type of audit I want. Say, for example, I want to pick out a BSI audit, for example. Okay, and I can clear the filter on that. Filter there. Or I can select, say, a department. So I just want to look at, say, let's say, projects, for example. So just pick out all of the audits we've carried out on projects. So in terms of audits, this is really good because you can sort of like search them really easily and really clearly. Alternatively, I can just pick out sort of like a report date, for example, when audits are carried out. I'll just clear that. You have to remember to clear the filter so whenever you do this. Just clear these filters. Clear the filter. Go to internal auditors now. So this is very useful when I'm searching for audits. Now, if I just pick out, say, audits that we've carried out in, say, German EMS, shows all of the audits we've picked out there, and I can sort of like screen that down. I can sort of like do another search for looking at a particular procedure. Let's say FMAP 58 material storage and handling. That's all the audits I've carried out in that area. I can look at sort of like one we did in October 2016. Open that as a document. Share that with you. That one, yeah. Screen. So it should come up on your screen now. So this is the audit we carried out on FMAP 58 material storage and handling. Got the audit form there and the details of the audit that we carried out. So we get control responsibilities, storage location plans, above ground tanks, underground storage tanks, cost materials, and so on. So I hope that's sort of like clear on audits. Let's go back to SharePoint again. Screen. Okay, so another sort of like register we have is environmental incidents. So we can look at environmental incidents. Well, it's very easy. One thing that we sort of like people to do, and one of the advantages with SharePoint is being able to get people to sort of like report environmental incidents. That's very easy. You can just do a link to the report an environmental incident page, add a new item, comes up with a report form. I can type in sort of like an environmental incident, like I could put in spillage in Boland Avenue, pick out the person reporting, put it myself. I'll put it myself. Right, so it's found me. Select the location, 8, the date, and then I can save that, and that will automatically sort of like go into the register as a new environmental incident there. So it's very easy for people to report an incident. And you've just seen on the bottom right of your screen, it's emailed me automatically to let me know that an incident's been reported. So if somebody does see an environmental incident, they can either obviously telephone me, is what I prefer, but if I'm not in the office, they can report it on SharePoint, and I automatically get an email back in relation to that environmental incident. Go through sort of like example. Here's one. An item of a real incident, so we can have a look at an incident where we had some vegetable oil that was put into a surface water drain, reported by one of my colleagues, and we undertake, when we get environmental incidents, we undertake an investigation into that, try and identify where it came from, what action was taken, and what we're going to do to clear that up, resolve it, or sort of like undertake additional actions, say, for example, cleaning a drain out, or doing some training with some of our the relevant parties involved. Okay, so go back to the home page now. So the other registers we have on there, I've got one on EMS meetings. So this basically sort of like is a repository for sort of like minutes and agendas from different meetings. So I have a whole list of, I picked up the EMS focus group here for an example. So we have the minutes, the presentations from focus group meetings stored on this page. Similarly, we've got them from the EMS steering group and the EMS management review group, and also we sort of like keep the terms of reference for these particular groups in that section of the of SharePoint. Final section we've got, final button, is the emergency preparedness and response. In this area we have environmental sort of like procedures or spillage procedures. We've got registers of potential air, ground and water pollution sources, drainage plans, and a link to our sort of our facilities environmental incident plan. So in addition to that, we have like an inventory where we keep our spill kits, for example. I think it's just coming up on your screen. So you can see sort of like what spill kits we've got, where they're located, how much liquid they can absorb, and so on. So it's quite a sort of like a comprehensive system, and there's always sort of like been additional sort of like features we've found that we can sort of like put onto it, starting from sort of like a fairly sort of like limited sort of range of documents we had on at the beginning. Initially, we just had sort of like our procedures, our policy statement, a copy of our objectives and targets on there, and then we broadened it out into put all our training materials on there, our incident log, and sort of like environmental incidents, and our sort of all our meetings information. So sort of taking you sort of like very quickly through the system. Any questions?
Okay, so if anyone's got any questions, feel free to take yourselves off mute. There's a little microphone button which should be just to the right-hand side of your name, or feel free, as I say, to pop them into the chat box, and I can read them out for you.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much. I think it's excellent system and a very good presentation. Can you come here and do the same?
Yeah. I wish I had more time. Is that Joel there? I wish we had more time to do that. Certainly, it has. I mean, it's the good thing about SharePoint is, I think, as James has said, if you have somebody who has an IT background, it does appear that they can sort of familiarise themselves with it and set you up a basic system. It's not too complicated to do that. But then we've very gradually built up what we actually use, which we actually store and put in our system over the last 3 years. And so it is, there's a lot of stuff in there now, but that's only because we've added to it bit by bit and bit by bit.
Okay, thank you for that. Just an additional question, because I've invited my colleague from Compliance and Health Safety to listen to the webinar. And the question is, I would assume the ISO, the OSHA 18000 parts is exactly the same, I would assume.
Yes, it is. I've just switched over to that to that screen. And so yeah, they are the same. We did have an advantage with this in that, well, not an advantage. The OHA system was in place a little before the 14001 system, and so we waited a bit until they how can I put it, rationalised the design of their management system before we went ahead and fully implemented the 14001 system. And that probably meant that we got a bit more of a streamlined management system. But it follows exactly the same structure. It's got the policy, it's got the FMAPs, the procedures, it's got the training, management review, audits and legal requirements, and then the things that are specific to to a health and safety management system, management contractors, permits to work, and so on.
I can see that you have permits to work, for example, which is great. Yep. From a control, access, security, how does that work? I mean, can every staff see everything? Do you have contractors accessing permit to work section? What do you have?
No, one of the key features of SharePoint is that you've got an option to really restrict and control permissions. So although external people can log into and see SharePoint, all the pages have permissions set against them, and it's very straightforward. I'm just trying to find here, but we're logged on as John here. And John doesn't have access to view that information, but you do have the control to control who sees what, whether they can just read only or read write or whatever. It's a very powerful permissions feature.
But I guess I'd be able to edit pretty much anything on 14,001 if you look at it. If you can show an example, then check it.
Okay, thank you.
So you've got John can see the site permissions for the 14,001, and you can set different. You can set up user groups, or so that you can add people into these user groups, which again helps you control groups of people rather than having to control individuals. So it just saves a bit of work, but it's all very easily manageable.
Okay, great. We've had a question in from Rosie as well, just to say what issues have you faced with using SharePoint?
It's not perfect. We've had some odd glitches with it, like we had an issue with dates.
Oh yeah.
It was automatically switching dates to an American standard of dates, which it transpired was sort of like a bug. Was it a bug in it?
It was. It took a bit of delving into, but it was a setting in one of the document libraries, which just needed. There's a little bit of code in there that just needed removing. Yeah, it caused a lot of head scratching, that one, but we got there. I think other issues were that I've come across were with the sort of the workflow, the automated sort of email notifications that you can set up to send out, like John demonstrated when there's an environmental incident. Similarly with permits to work, we can notify people when permits to work expire automatically. We don't need to keep looking at that. When I started with the university, there's been an attempt to get these notifications to work automatically, but they weren't working. It took a couple of weeks of quite intensive research to figure out why they weren't working and what we do to resolve that, and we got there eventually. But it's sort of going back to the self-teaching, if you will. It turned out to be quite a simple little solution to resolve the problem and get them working seamlessly, which they do now. That's something that I came up against.
Okay. Has anybody else?
One thing I didn't.
Oh, sorry, John. Carry on.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, if anyone else has got any questions.
One thing I didn't show is you can put sort of like diagrams on there, sort of extract some of the information from the system. This one just shows, for example, the status of non-conformance register. So we've got left-hand sort of pie chart. We've got 257 closed sort of like issues rated in the non-conformance register and 76 ongoing ones, and then the other two shows a sort of split between departments and root causes of those non-conformances. So it is good in that you can extract sort of like data from the system to do an analysis of like where issues are actually coming from.
Okay, we've got one more question in, just to say, where did you find the online resources needed to teach yourself about SharePoint, James? Okay,
so one of the main areas I go to is a site called, you might be aware of it, called lynda.com, which is it's a site that has a whole host of online tutorials, video tutorials for a host of different software applications, SharePoint being one of them. And it has a plethora of videos showing from the very basics to some quite in-depth things. So over the course of sort of probably 2 or 3 months, I'd take myself away for an afternoon and just sit through a couple of hours of tutorials and make notes. And so that was a big help to me. And I hate to say it, but Google, if someone was asking me to do something that I wasn't terribly sure of, I'd stick a question in Google. There are sites and forums, and there's a couple of shall we say SharePoint gurus who have their own websites who have written articles on various bits and pieces that I was able to read and help me out with these questions that I had.
Okay, James, can you just say the name of the first website again, please? I think.
Yeah, so it's lynda.com. It's I think lynda.com.
Okay, thanks.
Could you have another question? Is that possible?
Yeah, that's fine. We've got time for one more.
When you were showing the pie chart, the dashboard of audits,
yeah,
are they pie charts that you basically create yourself by just reading through the audits and saying I have 5 non-conformities and 2 observations and so on, or do you have a somehow automated system to pick up all those findings from the audits, so it's automated in a way?
Yeah, no, it's all automated. So if you added another non-conformance, it would automatically update the pie chart.
And when do you, so sorry, it's not clear to me, where do you add this non-conformity? From the report or from the somewhere in your templates?
Okay, right. So what will happen is the non-conformances will be raised in an audit, say from the audit register. So I could pick up, say, an audit, an environmental inspection of our sports centre, just brought up there. If there's any issues that were raised in there, like some observations and so on. And then that audit report is a sort of like a separate, or that audit or inspection report is a separate document, and any observations or minor non-conformances or major non-conformances then get copied into the non-conformance register. So this is the audit non-conformance register. So they'll go into, that observation will go into the non-conformance register, and you can see sort of like looking along the non-conformance register, you can pick out sort of like the date of the non-conformance, the source of it, an internal audit, the department, area procedure, category, is it a minor? I could go in there and just pick out minors, for example. You could sort of filter from there. You could sort of like see what the finding was, what was the root cause, the response, the agreed action, who's responsible for it, date, and the status. So I can pick up, say, either the closed ones, or I can look at the ongoing ones as well. And so SharePoint just sort of like will look at the status and sort of like column, because it's a selectable sort of like item. I will say, right, count up where you've got 50 odd ongoing and 250 closed audits. Same with the other pie charts.
Okay, and does it give you a reminder, or you need to go in the system?
Can it give you reminders? I think it can give you.
Yes.
It can give. I think it can pretty much give you as many reminders as you want by email, or so it could remind you that you need to carry out audits, couldn't it?
Yeah.
It could set up reminders to remind you that non-conformances have not been a non-conformance has been raised, or a non-conformancy has not been closed out within a specified period. It can send you an email reminder for that. So I think sort of like in terms of reminders, it can probably do quite a lot.
Yeah.
As long as you can set a date for it in the system, in one of the sort of like the columns, it can send out automatic reminders to somebody who you've got on your sort of like university mailing list who you can select.
And you can set that if you've got a date that something needs to be completed by, you can set a reminder to go out 2 weeks prior to that, a month prior to that. So you can add calculated fields that will allow you to send emails out either on the date, before the date, or both if you wish.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we are very nearly out of time. John and James, are you happy if I'll email everyone round a link once I've uploaded this recording as a podcast. Are you happy if I pop your email addresses on that email, just so that if anyone has any questions that occur to them after the webinar, they can get in touch with you easily?
Yeah, that's fine.
No problem.
Great, brilliant. Okay, wonderful. Have you two got anything else you want to cover before we wrap up?
All I'd sort of like add is that I started off with sort of like low expectations of the system, and I've been very sort of like pleased in what it's been able to do. So it has proved a good system, and it's sort of like proved to be able to do sort of like a lot more than I initially realised. So it's it's certainly a good option to pursue for management of your records for a management system.
Okay. Wonderful. Right. Well, I just want to say a huge thank you to John and James for sharing their insights today. I think it's been a really useful webinar. So thanks very much. As I said, I'll get this recording onto our website later and send a link to all attendees. So please feel free to share with colleagues if you think that will be useful. And thank you all for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.